Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 10, the Islamic World. In this chapter, we're going to look at the beginnings of the Islamic culture and religion, as well as how it comes to dominate much of the Middle East in North Africa. So we're really going to focus on its origins. If you look at the picture here in front of you, this is the Dome of the Rock, very, very famous cultural and religious site for the Islamic world. We'll get a little bit more into what this building is a little bit later. Now, in this chapter, there are three sections. So the focus of this lecture is going to be on section 1. I apologize for the poor quality of the map here, but we're going to look at the rise of Islam, its beginnings, its basic traits in terms of the religion itself, because you can't understand the Islamic cultures and empires that develop without understanding a basic understanding of the religion. And we're going to focus on its beginnings in the Arabian Peninsula around Mecca and Medina. All right, so there's a few things to keep in mind. If you have your textbook in front of you, take a look at the timeline there to see what was going on in the Muslim world versus what else was going on in the world at the time, to see some connections. The Middle East, you might hear it referred to as Southwest Asia. Typically, we just call it the Middle East as a popular vernacular. It is the bridge between Africa, Asia, and Europe. And because of this, it's a place of contact. It's been nicknamed the crossroads of the world for both good and bad reasons. And we can kind of go through those as we go forward. But goods and ideas and so forth have been traded and exchanged and mixed throughout this region for centuries. All right, so you can't understand the rise of Islam and the Middle East itself without understanding the Bedouins. And the Bedouins are a group of people that live in the Arabian desert. They're nomadic. They're organized into very small groups. You might hear them referred to as tribes or clans. And typically they're together, organized together for not only support for themselves, but security. Life in the Arabian desert, specifically at the time of the rise of Islam in the centuries before and after, was very, very harsh because of climate, because of the trading systems and so forth. So you needed some kind of protection, and the Bedouins organized themselves that way. And there are several ideals that were developed by the Bedouin people that are going to transition themselves into the Islamic world as we move forward, and that's courage. And loyalty to family, being in a close-knit group, develop that. And then also for protection reasons, they developed great military skill. And in the early years of the Islamic people, as they push forward and take over larger tracts of land, this military skill that's going to be inherited from the Bedouins is going to be a great trait to have. All right, so to understand some things in the Arabian Peninsula at the time of the rise of Islam in the early 600s, towns are starting to arise a little bit more in terms of they're getting more power, they're getting more wealth because of the increased trading that's running through both the Byzantine and Sassanid empires that the Arabian Peninsula sits near. Now, typically these towns, because of the harshness of the climate, they're located near some source of body of water, typically an oasis or so forth. Now, just like we've seen throughout history, at any point in time, if merchants are trading or present, there's a spread of ideas and goods from really anything that you want to look at, whether it's religion, whether it's a cultural ideal, whether it's a disease, products, whatever. And you're seeing this more and more at this time because you're seeing a better development of the routes of the Silk Road. They're becoming more popular, much more easier to traverse than what you were seeing earlier on in the void of the fall of the Roman Empire and the Han Empire in China. So there's going to be some increased trade there. Now, if you look at the map here, you can see this is the Silk Road. Obviously, what we're focusing on here is the Arabian Peninsula. And even though it's kind of off the beaten path, just a touch in terms of the land routes, those routes are there. And it is becoming a much more populated trade route during this period in time. All right, so to understand life in the Arabian Peninsula and the rise of Islam itself, you need to understand the importance of Mecca. Now, Mecca was a very popular trading post for caravans to stop for two reasons. One, there's oasis there, and two, more importantly, it was a religious site. And religious pilgrims would go there, visit it. Typically, they would actually visit the Kaaba, which is the main place of worship in Mecca and still is to this day. Now, the Kaaba was an important building because it was believed to be a place of worship for Abraham. And it eventually grew to be a religious site for many different idols and faiths and gods throughout the time. And people loved it. They would go there and visit it all the time. And because of this connection of the various religions into Abraham, you're going to see a connection to the Kaaba in Mecca, to the two main monotheistic religions that exist before Islam, Judaism and Christianity. So this is going to be a connection of very importance in terms of not only why Islam develops as a monotheistic faith, but also in terms of its connections with Christianity and Judaism that we'll get into later. All right, so here's a picture of the Kaaba. This is today with the blacked out crowd in the background to kind of put more emphasis even on this big giant building. But this is the main place of pilgrimage in Mecca that when all Muslims take the Hajj to Mecca, this is where they would go visit. All right, so to further understand Islam and how it rose, you have to understand who created it, who started it, and that was Muhammad. Now, one thing real quick, the top symbol on the right-hand side there, that is actually Arabic for Muhammad. You will not see Muhammad in an artistic representation as a person generally, because that's frowned upon in Islamic culture. If you do, you will see his face whited out. So typically, if you see Muhammad, you'll see him artistically in this form using Arabic. Now, he was born into a very powerful family, but because of the harshness of life in the Arabian Peninsula, he's orphaned at the age of 6. He's raised by an uncle. He becomes a very successful trader and business manager for a woman named Khadijah. Now, Khadijah, she actually becomes his wife. And you need to understand, at this time, women in the Arabian Peninsula, they could gain significant places of power, but we won't get into that too much. Now, he believed that he was the prophet of Allah, actually the last prophet of Allah, and the reason he believed this is he would go up into the caves in the mountains above Mecca, and it was there that it was said that he received the word of Allah or God from the archangel Gabriel, and was led down the path to understanding what religion was and so forth, for what would be the one true religion. So he founds the Islamic faith. It's a monotheistic culture. Again, you have to tie this back to the ideas of the connections with Islam, or Judaism and Christianity. We'll get into that a little bit more later, like I said. Now, Muhammad, when he starts and founds Islam, the people of Mecca are threatened by his teachings. And the main reason why isn't so much that it's monotheistic, it's that they fear that Mecca is going to lose its religious appeal. One of the reasons why it's such a popular destination as a trading spot, which brings in a lot of wealth and goods and so forth, is that it has religious appeal. The Kaaba is a very important place for many people of many different faiths and in religion. So they don't want to lose that. So he is actually threatened. There's a plot to actually kill him. And Muhammad is forced from the city. Now, this journey that he's going to take from Mecca, once he leaves it, he's going to go to the city of Yathrib. We know it as Medina today. This journey is going to be known as the Hijra when you read the Quran and look at the history of the Islamic faith. Excuse me. Now, when Muhammad moves to Medina or Yathrib, he is able to organize a lot of followers, primarily because there's a significant population in Yathrib that is Christian and Jewish. So they're very, very familiar with monotheistic culture. So it's not something of a big leap for them to change, or at least get behind him as well. And those that don't necessarily change, Christians and Jews in Yathrib, still support him or still have a position in his role of that city, because, as we'll see later, Christians and Jews in the Islamic faith still have some benefits that others do not. Now, while he's in Mecca, Yathrib, he gains a lot of followers, shows off his political and military skills. Now, what Muhammad decides to do after a few years is he's able to gain enough military, enough of a military force, about 10,000 men, to march on the city of Mecca. And when he does, he's successful. They're able to take the city. He does not kill anybody. He does kill people. It's a battle. Sorry, but he does not kill everybody in the city. He destroys the idols inside the Kaaba, not the Kaaba itself, because it's a place of worship based on Abraham, and Abraham is a key in the figure, our key figure within the Islamic faith. He says, look, if you pledge allegiance to Islam, pledge allegiance to him, and convert, then you'll be fine. Most do. He's able to, with this taking of Mecca, he's able to consolidate and unite the majority of the Arabian Peninsula, because Mecca and Yathrib or Medina are the two main cities on the peninsula. And this is a good starting point for the Islamic faith. However, Muhammad dies just 2 years after he takes the city of Mecca. So he's not going to be around for long to expand the religion in his way. All right, so that's going to change going down the line. Now, some basic ideas and practices of Islam for you guys to understand. You can't understand how the Islamic culture and empires expand and come to control this area without understanding the basic beliefs of the religion. I will not preach the religion to you. It's just understanding the basic ideas. In the Islamic faith, there is a teaching of good versus evil. They also teach that individuals are responsible for their own actions. These two things are very similar to Christianity and Judaism. Now, in the Islamic faith, the religious book of teaching is the Quran. And basically, the Quran is believed to be Muhammad's revelations in terms of what he has received from Allah via the Archangel Gabriel. So all those messages that he was receiving from the Archangel up in the caves above Mecca, this is those messages written down. Allah, or God, is just the source of authority in the Islamic faith. Okay? Monotheistic religion, he is the main force. Only God. Now, what people are supposed to do to live the religion and ensure that they're carrying out the actual faith is they have to follow the 5 pillars of Islam. We'll get a little bit more into those a little bit later. But basically, you carry out these 5 tasks to live the religion. One of the most important of the 5 pillars, is the Hajj. All Muslims, if they're able to, that's the key phrase there, if they're able to, in their life, at least once are supposed to perform a Hajj to Mecca and worship at the Kaaba. Now, a few other beliefs to help you understand some of the expansion and so forth. All Muslims are forbidden to eat pork, as well as drink intoxicating or alcoholic beverages. The main day for worship is Friday, and typically in the afternoons. So a little bit different from what most people here as Christians are familiar with as Sunday being the place of our day of worship. It's Friday for Muslims. Now they do other things throughout every day of the week, and we'll get into that later. There's no central religious figure within the Islamic faith. Unlike Christianity, where you have the Pope, there isn't a figure like that in Islam. You have scholars such as ulamas and so forth that help, but they're not there's no central person. Now, the Quran is the official book of the religion, as we've talked about, but one thing that helps unify all Muslims, specifically in the early days of the religion and still to this day, is the Quran is supposed to only be written in Arabic. And that is supposed to provide a unification or unifying ideal for all Muslims, because as they expand, you'll see they come across various different cultures, people that speak so many different languages, but the one thing that can tie them all together is that if they're going to convert to Islam, they have to learn Arabic to actually follow the faith, because the Quran is only written in that language. Now, there's 2 other parts to it. The idea of the Sunnah is that you live by Muhammad's example. So if you follow by what he would do, or at least try to, you have a proper living within that faith. And the Sharia is a regulation or regulating laws and ideals that help the conduct of really all life, not just the religion, but how you conduct yourself as a person, family life, and the community and business, which is important because it gives a social construct in terms of a kind of a rules to follow. Now, here are the 5 pillars I told you we're going to talk about. The first one is faith. Basically, that is you testify there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So really the only difference that this is in terms of like if you look at like say Christianity, for example, is that you're looking at Muhammad as the messenger for God. Remember, God and Allah are interchangeable words here, so there's no difference. Prayer. All Muslims are supposed to pray 5 times a day, no matter where they are in the world, towards Mecca. That's why if you ever see a Muslim lay down their usually a mat or some kind of rug, and they pray and bow to the ground, they have to find which direction is Mecca. And if you go to a mosque at any point in the United States or anywhere else, they will all be pointed in that direction towards Mecca. The third one is alms, giving to the poor, a special religious tax, providing for the community that doesn't have enough to provide for. Typically, you see this in a lot of religions. 4, fasting. This is called Ramadan. Now, this moves throughout the year. This is typically where you fast during the day. And the idea of this is to show that your spiritual needs are greater than your physical needs. And some people will actually take this a step. Some Muslims will take this very, very seriously, such as they won't even swallow their own saliva during daylight hours. Now, you can eat and drink during non-daylight hours. So it's not like they're not eating, it's just during daylight they can't. And then the last one we've already talked about is the pilgrimage or the Hajj to Mecca at least once, and all people when they arrive there, they wear similar clothing. If you guys remember, we're going to go back to that picture. They're all wearing, I know it's blacked out, but everybody's wearing white, and that's to show that everybody's similar in terms of their worship towards Allah. Okay, now the last slide here for this lecture is I want to just go over this one. This is a really important one, so focus on this one specifically for like an essay, hint, at the end of this unit, but also because it's important to understand for today, because there's a lot of misnomers in terms of Islam and how it's perceived because of certain actions such as like September 11th and so forth. There's a lot of stereotypes. So make sure that you understand these connections. So between Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, Muslims view Allah as the Christian and Jewish God. Okay, so to them there's no difference. The Christian God is still the same person. It's just they refer to him as Allah. Okay, understand that. It's a very key point. Number 2, Jesus is viewed as a prophet. Okay, he's just not viewed as the Son of God. Okay, they view him as immortal. They view him as an important religious figure. He's just not the Son of God. He acts as a prophet in the same vein as Muhammad. Number 3, the Torah and the Gospels. So the religious book for the Jews, which is the Torah, and the Gospels, which is an important part of the Christian faith in the Bible. Those are viewed as religious books and religious texts that are very important to understand the Islamic faith. Okay, so they play a huge role. It's just the difference is this is the Quran, just as Muhammad is viewed as the final prophet, the Quran is viewed as the final religious book. Okay, they also have a heaven, a hell, and a judgment day. All 3 religions trace their ancestry to Abraham. Okay, we've talked about that earlier. That's why the Kaaba was left up. It's why Mecca is an important city for Islam. It's actually an important city for Christianity and Judaism as well. And then lastly, the Islamic faith, and this is where we get pushed back in terms of what we've seen in the current years with actions. If you actually look at Islam, it stresses religious toleration specifically towards Christians and Jews as well as Zoroastrians, but we won't talk about that part as much. And the reason why is because these people are viewed as the people of the book. Okay, if you look at in terms of the books themselves, the religious texts, the Muslims follow the Torah and the Gospels as well as the Quran. The Christians and Jews follow that as well as many other similarities. So they have religious toleration. That's the ideal in terms of how it's supposed to be followed. Okay, so that's the introduction to this, or first lecture for this chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys with section 2 shortly, and have a good day.